Bruno Mars has spent more than 3 decades on a stage. He was performing for paying crowds before most kids learned to ride a bike without training wheels. And he has spent almost every year since chasing the next song, the next show, the next reinvention. Now, as he moves through his late 30s, the headlines around him have shifted. They are no longer just about record sales and Grammy wins. They are about debt, about a marriage that may or may not exist in the way fans assume, about a man who built an empire out of retro sound and spotless choreography, and who is now the subject of speculation he has never fully addressed. This is the story of how he got here, the real, documented parts of it, and the rumors that grew around him, examined honestly rather than invented. Peter Gene Hernandez was born in Honolulu in October 1985, into a family where music was not a hobby. It was a family business. His father played percussion and led a band. His mother sang and danced. By the time he was old enough to remember much of anything, he was already part of the act. Hawaii in the late 1980s and early 1990s had a thriving nightclub and revue scene built around tourists, and the Hernandez family built a show around it. A variety act that covered everything from 50s rock and roll to Elvis impersonations, with young Peter front and center in a rhinestone jumpsuit doing his best young Elvis. He wasn't a novelty for one night. He performed regularly, sometimes multiple shows a week, and by most accounts had logged hundreds of performances before he reached double digits in age. Local press picked up on him. He appeared in local television spots and eventually landed a small role in the 1992 film Honeymoon in Vegas, playing a mini Elvis impersonator, a fitting bit of casting given how he'd spent his childhood evenings. It was a strange kind of stardom, real enough to be written about, small enough that it evaporated the moment the family act did. That happened when he was a teenager. His parents separated. The family show that had structured his entire childhood came apart. And with it went the steady income and sense of routine that came from performing every week. The Bruno Mars mythology that gets repeated in interviews and profiles describes a stretch of real instability during this period. Inconsistent housing, thrift store clothes, and a teenager who kept performing anywhere he could, including impersonating Michael Jackson at local shows for cash. Whatever the exact details, the through line is consistent and well documented. The shine of early childhood fame gave way to a much harder adolescence, and it's a period he has referenced, if only briefly, in interviews over the years. At 18, not long after graduating high school, he moved to Los Angeles to try to make it as a professional musician, no longer the family act centerpiece, but a solo artist trying to get signed on his own terms. He took the stage name Bruno Mars around this time, a name that stuck for the rest of his career, distancing himself from both his birth name and his identity as a child performer. Los Angeles was not kind to him right away. Like most aspiring musicians who moved to the city with more ambition than money, he cycled through cheap apartments and unstable arrangements, took odd jobs to cover rent, and shopped demos around to anyone who would listen. In 2004, Motown Records signed him to a development deal. It didn't work out. The label reportedly wanted to position him as a Latin pop crossover artist, in the mold of the Ricky Martin wave from a few years earlier, a marketing angle he resisted, since it had little to do with the kind of music he actually wanted to make. Within roughly a year, the deal fell apart, and he was dropped without ever releasing a single. For most artists, that kind of early, public failure ends a story. For Bruno Mars, it became the hinge point that led to the next chapter. Around this time, he connected with songwriter and producer Philip Lawrence, who had also been let go by Motown, and later with producer-engineer Ari Levine. Together, they formed a production and songwriting team that eventually took the name the Smeezingtons, rather than chasing another artist deal. They spent years writing and producing songs for other performers, working out a modest home studio, and slowly building a catalog and a reputation inside the industry. The turning point came through a string of outside placements, a co-write on Flo Rida's Right Round, which became a #1 hit, and a writing credit on B.O.B.'s Nothing on You, another major hit that also prominently featured Bruno Mars' own vocals on the hook. Those two songs did more than pay the bills. They put his voice and his songwriting in front of a mainstream audience before he'd even released a proper solo single, and they gave record labels a reason to take a second look at the guy Motown had passed on. His first proper single as a lead artist, Just the Way You Are, was released in the summer of 2010 and became a global #1, launching his debut album Doo-Wops and Hooligans later that same year. The album was recorded on a comparatively modest budget and became a commercial powerhouse, spawning hit after hit, Grenade, The Lazy Song, and more, and turning him, within roughly a year, from a journeyman songwriter into one of pop music's biggest new stars. He picked up multiple Grammy nominations out of the gate and won his first Grammy for Best Male Pop Vocal Performance in 2011. From there, the hits kept compounding rather than slowing down. His second album, Unorthodox Jukebox, released in 2012, leaned harder into genre experimentation, reggae, funk, arena rock, and produced Locked Out of Heaven, a song that pulled unmistakably from classic rock and new wave influences and became one of the defining pop singles of the era. Critics who had pegged him as a tidy hit machine were surprised by how eclectic the record actually was, and it went on to win Best Pop Vocal Album at the Grammys. If Unorthodox Jukebox proved he could stretch stylistically, Uptown Funk, released in late 2014 as a collaboration with producer Mark Ronson, proved he could dominate culture at a scale few pop songs manage. The track spent an extended run at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming one of the defining songs of the mid-2010s, and it cemented Bruno Mars not just as a hitmaker, but as one of the era's most reliable live performers, a reputation solidified by his 2014 Super Bowl halftime show, and a second one that followed a few years later, making him one of a small handful of performers to headline the Super Bowl stage twice. His third studio album, 24K Magic, arrived in 2016 and doubled down on throwback funk and R&B influences, drawing comparisons to late 1980s and early 1990s soul records. At the 2018 Grammys, the album swept the top categories: Album of the Year, Record of the Year, and Song of the Year for the title track, a rare sweep that put him in a small group of artists to win all 3 top awards for a single project. The tour that followed became one of the highest-grossing tours of the decade, taking him across 6 continents. Rather than simply following up 24K Magic with another Bruno Mars solo album, he spent the early 2020s on a different kind of project, a full retro soul duo with Anderson and Paak called Silk Sonic. Their debut single, Leave the Door Open, released in 2021, became an instant hit and eventually swept the top Grammy categories the following year, adding yet another Album of the Year caliber body of work to his resume, though this time as one half of a duo rather than a solo headliner. The pattern continued into the mid-2020s with a string of high-profile collaborations rather than a traditional solo album cycle. Die with a Smile with Lady Gaga, released in 2024, became one of the year's biggest global hits and drew acclaim for the pair's vocal chemistry, followed by APD, with Rose of Blackpink, which became one of the most streamed K-pop crossover singles ever released. Both songs extended his reach into audiences, Gaga's pop base, Blackpink's global fandom, that a solo Bruno Mars album alone might not have touched, and both reinforce a broader pattern in his career, a preference for collaboration and reinvention over repeating a formula that already worked. In March 2024, a cable news segment aired a claim, without naming sources, that Bruno Mars owed a substantial sum, reportedly around $50 million, to MGM Resorts, tied to a Las Vegas residency and alleged gambling losses, and that his ongoing shows at Park MGM were effectively working off that debt. The claim spread fast online, picked up by gossip accounts, repeated on social platforms, and amplified by commentators who treated it as settled fact rather than an unverified report. MGM Resorts responded directly in statements given to entertainment and business outlets. The company said Bruno Mars did not owe them any money and described their business relationship with him in positive terms, emphasizing his standing as one of the top drawing performers in Las Vegas. Major outlets that covered the follow-up reported MGM's denial straightforwardly, and no further evidence of an actual debt has surfaced publicly since. Bruno Mars himself never issued a formal statement addressing the rumor directly. He hasn't confirmed the debt, and he hasn't given a detailed, on-the-record denial beyond MGM's own comments. What he has done on more than one occasion during live shows is make wry, joking references to the rumor from the stage, riffing on the idea of being on the hook for millions, which fans and press interpreted as him not taking the story too seriously rather than as any kind of confirmation. That distinction matters. Turning a rumor into stage banter is not the same as verifying it, and treating those jokes as an admission stretches what actually happened. It's also worth noting that gambling has come up in his own past interviews in a general, self-deprecating way. References to enjoying casinos and having lost money at tables, the kind of remarks plenty of Las Vegas headliners make about the city they perform in. That's different from evidence of a specific nine-figure debt. And conflating the two is exactly how a single unsourced segment turned into a headline repeated across millions of search results within days. The other major thread of recent tabloid interest involved his longtime partner, Jessica Caban, whom he has been with since the early 2010s. Caban has kept an unusually low public profile for someone dating one of the world's most famous performers. She rarely appears at high-profile events with him and doesn't post extensively about their relationship, which is itself part why fans have treated small changes in her online behavior as significant. In late 2024 and into early 2025, some fans noted the absence of an anniversary post from Caban and pointed to the two of them being photographed separately over the holidays as a sign something had changed. When a fan asked directly, in a comment on one of her posts, whether the two had split, Caban replied with a short, warm message expressing continued support for his career and achievements, a response that read to many as affectionate rather than as confirmation of anything specific, though it didn't fully settle the speculation either. As of now, there's been no public statement from either of them confirming a breakup, and they're still visibly connected on social media. The honest answer is that outsiders don't actually know the current status of their relationship, and neither of them has said anything that resolves it one way or the other. None of this, the rumor cycle, the relationship speculation, has slowed down the actual output. If anything, the last few years have been some of the busiest of his career, stacked with collaborations across genres and audiences that stretch well beyond his traditional pop-funk base. At an age when many of his late 2000s peers have either scaled back or leaned entirely into legacy act nostalgia tours, Bruno Mars has kept releasing new work, kept forming new creative partnerships, and kept selling out Las Vegas residency shows that, by all publicly available evidence, he is doing because they're profitable and popular, not because he's paying off a debt to the venue that hosts him. What's changed, if anything, is the shape of the attention around him. In his 20s, the story was singles and sales figures. In his 30s, it's become just as much about the parts of his life he doesn't talk about, the relationship he's kept almost entirely private, the version of Las Vegas excess that tabloids want attached to him, the mythology of a kid who slept in unconventional places in Hawaii, now living the kind of life that invites rumors about money and gambling almost by default, simply because of how much money moves through that world. The most accurate way to describe where things stand is not that Bruno Mars finally confirmed anything. It's that he has mostly done what he's always done. Let the music and the live show speak, respond to rumors with a joke instead of a press release, and keep his personal life mostly out of conversation. Whatever comes next for him, professionally or personally, hasn't been revealed yet, not by him, and not by anyone with real authority to speak for him. Everything else, for now, remains speculation.